Hello, hello. Heretic. This is a new one. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. I've heard generally good things about it, and see if my opinion reflects that or not. It's an unusual role for Hugh Grant. I mean, I don't really know too many movies he's been in, but to my memory, they've been like either comedies or like romance things or dramas, or never really like the horror or suspense type film that I can remember. I could be wrong, but that being said, yeah, let's get into it. Spoiler alert, you know the drill. I'm going to be talking about the movie. If you don't want it spoiled, don't watch this video. Also, if you enjoy quality content, probably shouldn't watch this video either. I tend to go very off script, and I don't even have a script. So, just an open conversation with myself that people can watch. Anyway, that was ridiculous. Okay, so it starts off with these two young Mormon, I don't know what they're, you go door to door, like not, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, like Jehovah's Witnesses, they go door to door and they try to like, for lack of a better word, door to door salesmen, but they're like trying to get people to take in their religion. And if that's offensive, I don't mean that in any offensive way. It's just I don't know how else to explain it. So yeah, these two girls, we have Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, and they're kind of on a mission. They're sort of comparing notes on how many people they've converted, and all that kind of stuff. There's an interesting, the very first scene, it shows them talking about condoms and stuff, and it's very interesting. I didn't know a lot of things about Mormons or whatever, but like contraceptives are not a thing that should be allowed, apparently. Other things too that we can get into, like they're not supposed to have like caffeine, I think. But then in the show they're like, it's not like wrong, they just try to avoid it. I don't know anything about Mormonism, so if I get anything wrong in this video, I'm basing it on what my memory tells me this movie told me about it. So if anyone who is Mormon and watching, I don't know very much. I apologize. All right. So, whatever. They're talking. Their last stop of the day is this gentleman named Mr. Reed, who had reached out to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he wanted to know more about the Mormon religion. So they head to his house. They knock on the door. It takes him a while to get to the door, but he eventually does and lets them in. And well, before they go in, they say something along the lines of like, "We need to have like a woman present. Do you have like a female roommate or something?" He's like, "I have a wife," and they're like, "That's perfect." So they go in, and he goes to get his wife, who apparently just made like blueberry pie or something, and whatever. And he brings out this pie, and there's like 2 glasses of Coke, and he sets them down, and they don't take it because the whole like trying to avoid sugary drinks or whatever. Yeah, it starts off essentially pretty tame. He seems generally intrigued, and they're excited to tell them about their religion, but the wife is not coming out. But I guess he says that she's on her way or something, and I guess he seems pleasant enough that they're not too stressed. They kind of have a little intellectual conversation about religion, and then it starts, he's genuinely kind of intrigued and stuff, and they're telling him about it, and he brings up some interesting things. Like he's like, "I'm gonna ask you like a weird question. Are you okay with that?" And they're like, "I don't know, ask it and we'll see." So he asks about the church's stance on polygamy, which, again, I'm going by what the movie tells me. They say used to be a part of Mormonism, but was removed from the church at some point, and because it didn't align with their views, or it wasn't necessary anymore, or something like that. But that's brought up, and then he also brings up, Joseph Smith, who like he seems to like not buy the Joseph Smith thing, but still at this point he seems willing to listen, which is, that's gonna be a conversation for anyone, right? But he's more pleasant than probably a lot of the people that they visited have been, so they stay. And once again, they're kind of like, sorry, we just, not to be a pain, but we need your wife to come up. She doesn't have to, like, talk or anything. She just has to come and, like, sit with us and be in the same room. It's just, you know, part of our deal. I don't know if it's a religious thing or if it's just safety. Like, either one, it makes sense. Anyway, he's like, okay, I'll go get her. And then he wanders off again. Oh, it's raining, by the way. And their bikes are locked outside, so they're waiting, and they're kind of getting a creepy vibe, and they decide, you know what, we should probably go. So they attempt to, like, after the conversation is steered down the more confrontational road, they're like, all right, we're kind of done here. We've done what we can. It doesn't seem like he's going to be buying into it too much, so they attempt to leave out the front door, and then they stop and they're like, wait. He has her coats because he took their coats, and the bike lock is in the coat jacket pocket. They're debating in their head. It's about 2-mile walk in the rain. Is it worth it? They're kind of like, yeah, maybe we should just try to go anyway. So they try to open the door. The door is locked. There's no unlock on the inside. So that's fun. He comes back out, and they're like, hey, we really need to, like, see your wife or something. And he's like, okay, just follow me. We'll go see her. She's ready to meet you. And they're like, okay. And he walks off, and they're really sketched out, rightfully so. Sister Barnes fakes a phone call, and she's like, okay, we're actually being called back to the, is it diocese? I don't know what it's called. The church, we'll just say. Their elder is calling them or whatever. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're welcome to leave at any point. And they're like, okay, but like no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I am so sorry. They follow him to meet the wife, and they see like it goes down a dark hallway, and like the lights had turned off too, and he had explained it away as like it's an old house and it flicks on and off or whatever, but it's dark, ominous hallway, and they see a figure standing at the end of the hallway in the shadows, and they're like, Mr. Reed? And it's not moving, and they slowly approach it, and it turns out it's like a mannequin, like a statuette or something, a figure. Like, oh, thank God. And they finally turn down the hallway, and they enter the room where he is, and it almost looks like a little church, which is interesting. There's like very uniquely angled walls, and there are 2 doors. There's a green and a purple one, and a bunch of books everywhere, and it looks like there's like a pew, or like the church pews that you sit in, and then the like a podium thing. And they're trying to be polite, and they're like, hey, Mr. Barnes, you know, you've been really gracious host, but we got a call to go back to the church. We've been summoned. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to cut this short. He's like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, you're welcome to go at any time. I'm sorry for keeping you. Your coats are on the chair there. Go ahead. And then they're like, yeah, but the door won't open. Can you, like, unlock it for us? And he's like, yes. So the locks are actually on a timer. So once it's locked, you can't unlock them. I got a little carried away talking to you guys, and I forgot about the timed trigger, and unfortunately that's the case. So you guys are welcome to exit through the back, and he motions towards the doors on the back wall of that room. And they're kind of like, we'd rather go through the front. Can you unlock it? He's like, unfortunately, I can't. It's on an automatic timer. In the morning, it'll reopen, but I'm sure you guys don't want to stay here overnight, so please, you're more than welcome to go to the back. You saw the front of the house. It's not a big house by any means, so there's no way you're going to get lost or anything. They're like, okay. And then he's like, okay, but first, let's talk for a little bit. And he busts out a Monopoly game, and they're kind of like, and in their heads, they're probably like, we're not going to stay and play Monopoly with you, sir. Like, we need to leave. Thank you. Anyway, his whole point of that is the fact that Monopoly was based on another game called, like, the Landlord's Game or something like that from, like, a decade before or years before or something like that. And that Parker Brothers or whatever had, I think that's who does Monopoly, had taken the idea and remarketed it as their own. And then he pulls out a piece of fabric, and on it has the Star of David, the cross, and then, I apologize, I don't know what it is, but like an Islamic symbol of some kind. And he goes to explain that it's, you know, it's kind of like the 3 major religions of today. You have Judaism, the one who started it all, Christianity, or yeah, he says Judaism, which is like the Landlord's Game, the original, the OG, he says. Then we have Monopoly, which is Christianity, the by far most popular one. And then we have Islam, which came later, and it's like the electronic Monopoly. He puts that board down. He's like, see what I'm saying? And then, you guys, you're an even newer variant of the Abrahamic religions. And he puts down a Bob Ross special edition Monopoly, saying, and that's kind of like the branded one-off special edition version. And they're like, okay, I get what you're saying, but like a little deeper than Monopoly, I guess. And he's like, I don't see a difference. And then he plays a song, I forget what it's called, but it's that one by the Hollies, and he mentions that. He says, have you heard it? And they're like, no. And they're like, you've heard Creep by Radiohead. That's basically the exact same song, and then he goes into court case of that. And then they're still kind of like, I don't know, because I guess kids are too young to know Radiohead now, which is fine. And so he says, okay. And then there was Lana Del Rey, who released a version, I think it sampled Creep, and then Radiohead sued them. And there's, again, your, whatchamacallit, landlord game, Monopoly, electronic Monopoly, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, same thing. And I mean, they're picking up what he's putting down, but they want to leave. And he's like, so, in my studies, he's apparently like a religious scholar, or something like that. He studies like various religions of the world, and he's been looking for like the one true religion. And he says essentially like, well, he basically boils it down to, you have a choice. You can either believe or not believe. And then he writes believe on one of the doors and disbelief on the other door, which is like getting even creepier. And he's like, okay, so now you should decide. And I'll tell you right now, one of them is the right choice. And they're like, And so, yeah, Barnes is like, okay, well, I'm going to take the belief door because no matter what happens, I believe, and that's where my strength lies and whatever, blah, blah. And Paxton is like, I really think we should take the disbelief one because he's clearly like either an atheist or a non-believer of some kind, and he probably wants us to admit that we don't believe. Anyway, they end up taking the belief one, and it turns out both doors go to the same place anyway. So there's like a descending stairway that initially, when they go and check the doors, Reed says that he's up on a hill, and if they saw the outside of the house, they would have seen that behind the hill, or behind the house is a hill. So obviously you have to go down to get out, right? Okay. Anyway, that's not the case. They choose the belief door, and it goes down into like a little cellar area that's like really kind of unfinished, and like there's water dripping and stuff, and there's one little window in the top and a table in the middle, and he shuts the door on them, and they're stuck in this room. And he says something along the lines of, basically, you guys are going to see a miracle. Like, you're going to find out what the true religion is today, and I'm going to show you a miracle. And some old decrepit woman comes out, and she like brings a blueberry pie, and they're like, oh god, is that his wife? No. Then he announces that this is a living biblical prophet of God, and they're like, what? And she's, in rough shape, but, she has like, I think glossed over like black eyes or something, I can't really remember, but there's definitely something strange about her, other than being like in this weird basement in this dude's house. Anyway, she brings out the pie and sets it down, and then she like kneels down, and like you can hear like bones shifting and stuff. So I don't know what she does. She like contorts herself into like a little bean shape of like, I don't know what. My mind right away went, okay, so this guy's like the devil, or he's like a supernatural thing or something. No, it's not that at all. Then he basically says, okay, so you guys are going to see a miracle. Oh yeah, earlier he compared like the story of Jesus Christ to earlier mythologies and religions that had a very similar story. Even showed like a list of like 12 or whatever different prophets that were born on December 25th and died and were resurrected and all this stuff. And he's pointing out all the similarities, which is like, it's a good argument, to be fair. Like, whether you're religious or not, you say, okay, yeah, that's fair. Even if you believe that yours is the true one, I mean, there's logic there. Like, you could get why people think that, so they're like, okay, but like, there are differences to these stories, which later Barnes points out. And she's like, I can't remember the exact differences that she mentions, but she knows a lot of them. So it's like, okay, there are variations of the story. It's kind of that age-old thing where, like, you tell a story enough, you're gonna, even if you're unintentionally trying to make, or you're unintentionally plagiarizing something unknowingly that already exists because it's been so long that, like, most things have been thought of or something like that. I don't know. That has nothing to do with anything. But, anyway, back to the story. You're going to witness a miracle. This living prophet of God is going to eat this blueberry pie, which is my family's recipe, but I put in, like, belladonna and, like, poisonous stuff. I can't remember the other bit. Nightshade, I think, and belladonna. I don't know what it was. Something like poison. She's going to die in front of you, and then she's going to be resurrected. And you're going to witness a miracle. And they're like, what? Sure enough, she eats the pie, and shortly after, dies. And he says, and they're freaking out. They're like, oh my god, this man just, like, killed someone, basically. And then he's talking to them over, like, a loudspeaker. He's not in the room. Once he shut the door, that was it. So, that's freaky. At one point, their church elder realizes that they haven't returned to church and signed back in. Both of their names are on the whiteboard as no return yet, so he is worried, and he goes out and goes to all of the stops that are on their list to see where they are. He stops at, I think there's a shop first, and then eventually he gets to Mr. Reed's place, and he knocks on the door, and there's like a buzzer that buzzes in the basement and in the study that he's talking from, and he's like, oh, we got a visitor. Okay. Anyway, he goes and answers the door, and there's Eric Foreman, Topher Grace, who plays the elder. So that's fun. And he's just basically like, okay, you guys, we had two sisters who were doing their rounds and just want to make sure, did you see them or anything? He's like, no, I haven't seen them. And he's like, okay, but you had asked the church, to come and tell you about stuff. And he's like, which church? Latter-day Saints. Oh, yes, but no one's been here. They were supposed to be here today. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, do you want to come in and use the phone? He's like, no, that's fine. They're probably okay. I just, I have to make my rounds, make sure they're okay. And Reed's like, okay, fair enough. And so Eric leaves, Eric Foreman. He takes off. And he goes back downstairs. And then the buzzer rings again. And it's again Father Kennedy, aka Eric Foreman. And he's like, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. And then you can see Reed's kind of like, shit, is he like onto me? He's like, have you received this pamphlet? And he pulls out like the whatever the Mormon equivalent of like Watchtower is, their little religious pamphlet or something. He's like, no, but I will take it. And that's it. And then that's the last we see from the elder. So that was kind of funny. So yeah, just returns to give his word, which is good. Anyway, all that's done with. The girls at this point, while he's away, are like reaching under the door. So yeah, the belief and the disbelief go to the same room. They go up the stairways to the disbelief door, and they see that it goes in the same room, and they see a little tiny thing of matches on this rug. So they're like with their fingers trying to like pull the rug so they can get a match and like maybe start a fire and alert someone outside or whatever. They're pulling this rug, and the match thing is too big to get under the door, so they tip it over and they're trying to get matches out. And anyway, they get some matches, and they're trying to like light a fire in this damp cement area. I think they're trying to light something on fire. I can't really remember. But anyway, he comes down. He's like, let me take that. Takes the match. He's like, whatever. And then he lights another one and lights a candle. And he's like, okay, so okay, before this happens, I'm so sorry. The prophet does resurrect. So they come down the stairs when in between the ringing of the doorbell those two times, and Sister Paxton sees that the face of the prophet is slightly in a different position. She's like, she wasn't like that before. And Barnes is like, yeah, she was. She hasn't moved. Anyway, then the door goes and they run up again. And they come back down and they're trying to do the matches thing. And then all of a sudden they realize she's not at the table anymore. And she's standing right behind them. And she's basically telling them what she saw when she died, which is sorry, it was what Mr. Reed said too, is like, she's gonna die, come back, and she'll tell you what she sees in the afterlife. So anyway, she does, and she does, and she does, which ends up being, you know, white clouds, a feeling of disassociation, sorry, and that it wasn't real. So that's fun. At this point, Reed comes back downstairs, thanks the prophet, leads her back out of the room or whatever, and that's that. So there you go, a resurrection. That's pretty interesting. They're not really buying it. So Barnes is a little bit more outspoken than Paxton. So Sister Barnes is like, okay, first of all, that's not a miracle. That's what I would I would say is the equivalent of a magic trick. It can be done, you know. She starts going off and whatever, and he ends up saying like that his religion, he believes that like life is a simulation or something. And at this point, I forgot to mention that when they were still in the study area, they had taken like a letter opener as a weapon in case they need it. And Barnes had given it to Paxton saying, listen, I've been like mouthing off a little bit, so he's watching me carefully, but he's not watching you. So if I give you a signal, you have to be the one to you know, shank him. She's like, oh god. Anyway, so she has this ready as he's confronting her, and she's kind of calling him out on his shit. And he takes a box cutter and just cuts her throat before she can give the signal for the other one to stab. And she falls and bleeds. And obviously Paxton is like freaked out. So she takes off, runs up the stairs, tries to like get out, can't. At this point, Reed is like coaxing her down, like, come back down, come join the party. You know, she does. And that's when he like, you can see Barnes like still breathing and like labored breaths. She's dying. Not able to like, not conscious or anything. He's like, okay, well, I think we got to take this to the next level. And he like pulls up her arm and like cuts here and like digs in her arm and pulls, and there's like a vein out. And he's like, no, that's a vein. Then he pulls out a little metal cylinder thing. He's like, there we go. The flames react to the electricity in these implants. And this is proof that she's a program and not a human being. She's an NPC, basically. When they die, they don't come back. The players, however, when they die, they come back. And that was like your prophet. And I sense that you are different because a flame reacted to you differently than her or whatever, something like that. So she's not an NPC, is what he's trying to say. And she's like, okay, I get that. I've heard that theory, but it's, you know, I'm not buying that at all. And finally she sort of stands up for herself. She's like, hey, first of all, like, that's not, like, it's not a microchip. It's a birth control implant. And he's like, oh, okay. Doesn't the church frown on that? She's like, yeah, but she was a convert. Like, if that got out, it would, like, the church would not be thrilled. And obviously she's keeping it a secret, whatever. Okay, so that's dealt with. She says, I think what happened is you anticipated that someone would come looking for us. So when that bell rang and you left the room, you knew we would go to the stairs and you knew we would be trying to get out through the only way to get out. And in that time, I don't know how yet, but someone removed the body and sat down in her place. I saw the head in a different position. I know something's going on. I don't think that's a miracle. I think you're just messing with me. And he's like, okay, all right. He's like, okay, let's look for a secret door then. There would have to be a secret door, right? So he goes around, he's like tapping on the walls. There's clearly no other exit or whatever, so. He's like, okay. And then she looks up. She sees the ceiling up there with the window. She looks under the table. Turns out there's like a little platform thing, or a cellar door under the table that this second prophet must have come up through. And he's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then if you go down there, you're going to find a dead body, right? She's like, right. He's like, okay, are you going to go down there? And she's like, if I have to. He's like, now why would you do that? She's like, I need to know the truth. I want to know. Anyway, she goes down there. Obviously, he shuts the door behind her. So she's in this even deeper cellar underground now. So I don't know who built this house, but it's like, it's pretty intense. It's like an underground tunnel that leads to a big room with like religious symbolism on the wall. I think the first room had like a Star of David or something, and like symbols of like the Abrahamic religions or something. And at the end of this very small room, there was another door, and when she opened that, it looked like there were like pagan symbols on the wall, meaning like, I guess, Abrahamic religions borrowed from paganism, whatever. I think it was pagan. I don't know much about religions, to be honest, but it looked like that. Then there's another door that leads to another room, which had similar symbols. I don't know if it was an even older religion. Maybe it was like Celtic and then pagan. I don't know. I don't know the difference, to be honest. I'm going to plead ignorance on this, but it looked like it was progressively getting older, the symbolism. Yeah, and then the last door has her bike lock on it. And so she's like, okay, obviously he wants me to see this. So she reaches in her pocket, takes the bike lock out, opens the door, enters the room. She sees a bunch of cages with a bunch of women in the cages in very like malnourished condition. So that's creepy. One in particular looks pretty rough, and she immediately takes her jacket off and like gives it to this woman, because I mean, that's one thing, whether you're religious or not, like a lot of the religions do teach you to be nicer to other people. Obviously there are examples where that isn't the case, but in general that's kind of the vibe that I find when I talk to religious people. But we're not going to go down that tangent, because that's a whole other conversation that is beyond a simple movie review. Anyway, so she gives this woman that, and of course at this point, Reed comes down the stairs like, very sorry for the cold. I think you understand what the religion is now, the one true religion. She's like, yeah, I do. And she basically explains the whole story of everything that happened, you know, the trapdoor, whatever, replacing the woman. This woman, you killed her, basically, like, I'm here because you controlled where I ended up. You knew exactly what I would do based on, you know, our talk earlier and like everything, my reactions. You knew where I would go. You knew how I would get here. And he's like, yeah. And she's like, so the real religion that you're trying to tell me is control. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, and she's, why are you doing this to these people, whatever. And that's the weird thing, is they're willing. They want to do this. The woman who died up there wanted to die. It's like drink the Kool-Aid, he says. Which, if you don't know what that is, there was like a cult that, I think it was Halley's Comet or something, and then a bunch of these people thought aliens were gonna take them, but they could only go into the ship if they like were in spirit form, so they all drank poison Kool-Aid. It's a whole thing. Anyway, he refers to that. And that's that. And he's going off on his like kind of polite but holier than thou, like, you know, all religions are wrong and it's not real, blah blah blah, which, yeah, I've seen better atheist versus religious debates, but anyway, he still makes some good points. But she letter openers him right in the like that just before he's about to cut her, and she bolts up the stairs, which he, on his way down, I guess that was going to be the final moment where he kills her or puts her in a cage or something. But she gets out, and she's running down these hallways, gets back to the study, runs out one of the other doors, loops around, she's back in the cellar. Like, what the hell? Turns out that a lot of these hallways, either they shift or they're designed to mislead you back to where you're going. She ends up going in a circle a couple of times, and he's... yeah. So he comes back down. She's in the main cellar area, like the one where the prophet died and resurrected. And he comes in and he's holding his neck, like he's dying. He ends up stabbing her in the stomach. She's essentially mortally wounded. And he says, okay, so are you gonna pray for us? And she's like, no, honestly, like, prayers don't work, dude. Like, there was like the prayer group study where they had a bunch of people that people prayed for and a bunch of people that people didn't pray for, and there was zero difference. But prayer it's a nice thing to do. Like, it's just a moment to think of someone other than yourself. I see that as a positive thing, whether it actually helps in a spiritual or supernatural way or not. I think in practice it's still a good method. So she prays. And he, like, weasels up to her as he's dying, and he, like, sort of rests his head on her shoulder, but you can see him holding that blade again. He's about to finish it. All of a sudden, whoosh, side of the head, bored with a nail in it. Barnes is still alive somehow. With her last bit of strength, she ends up smoking Reed in the head, killing him. Nail through the skull, through the brain, dead. And then she collapses, because that was like her last bit of strength, was to save Sister Paxton. And she dies, and the other cries, justifiably. And she goes to the study and finds like this sculpture, like an architectural sculpture of the layout of the building. Ends up finding a way out, which is through a ventilation thing, and escapes out that into like a snowy woodland area. I have no idea where this is supposed to be, because we never see the back of the house, but you don't really see any other houses around, so I have no idea what it is. Is it a simulation? I don't know, probably not, but it's weird. And earlier in the movie, during the very beginning, they had a discussion about, like, you know, when I die, I want to come back as a butterfly. That's what Barnes was saying to Paxton. And what I'm going to do is, I think it was Barnes to Paxton, or it was Paxton. One of them was saying to the other that they wanted to come back as a butterfly, and they would make sure that they would land on their loved one's hand, not their arm, their head, their shoulder, their hand, and that way they would know who it is. Lo and behold, Paxton is holding her gut, like, looking at her cell phone in the middle of this, like, snowy landscape, finally escaped out of the house, and a butterfly lands on her hand. So it is implied with that this is Sister Barnes' reincarnation, or whatever you want to call it. And that's the end. So, what did I think? I liked it. I really did. I don't think it was like the greatest movie in the history of time, but it was one of the more enjoyable ones. I've been kind of in a slump for the last couple of reviews, I think. I can't remember. But I like this one, so I'm going to give it, I'm thinking mid-sevens. 7.8? 7.82. I think that's reasonable. Should you watch it? Yeah, you should. It's cool. I would probably watch it again. Not like right away, but it would be one of those movies that occasionally I go back to, because I like the discussion and the conversation. Like, I'm fascinated with, like, religion and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think it's interesting as hell. So, like, that's right up my alley. Both sides of it. The argument for and the argument against. Like, I have watched, like, full-on, like, debates between an atheist and a religious representative, and I find it fun. So if you like that kind of stuff, it has some of those ideas in here. It'll probably be right up your alley. As a regular moviegoer, I would watch it anyway, because Hugh Grant is great in it. The two girls are solid. Topher Grace is in it for like 3 seconds, so you can't really comment on him, but overall, good movie. I say watch it. Yeah, that's it. All right. Peace.